He even, and this is amazing, designed his own money that some shops in San Francisco actually accepted as a form of payment. Did you know that in the 1800s there was once an emperor of the United States? I know what you're thinking, an emperor of the United States? Yeah, alright, but I am not kidding. His name was Joshua Abraham Norton, and he was born in England in 1818 and raised in South Africa. If you've ever heard of the 1820 settlers, his family was part of that. Basically, after the Napoleonic Wars, there were a lot of people in Britain who had next to nothing to their names, so the British government sponsored thousands of them to move to South Africa for better opportunities. However, Norton was by no means struggling when he moved to the United States, specifically San Francisco, in 1849. He moved with a fortune of $40,000, which in today's money is over $1.5 million. He was a 31-year-old businessman who found a lot of success in real estate, and he was doing pretty well for himself. In fact, according to some reports, at one point he had increased that fortune to the modern equivalent of almost $10 million. At least, that was until the year 1852 when a few things happened. First, a horrible drought spread throughout China, leading to a widespread famine, which birthed two separate rebellions, the Nian Rebellion and the Taiping Rebellion, both against the ruling Qing dynasty of the time. What did this have to do with the US? Well, because of the famine, China banned the export of rice out of the country in order to feed its people. Since China was the main exporter of rice at the time to the US, the price of it in the States rose dramatically. Now, being the businessman he was, Norton saw this as an opportunity. He found a shipment of rice coming in from Peru and hurried to purchase the entire thing, all 200,000 pounds of rice that it was carrying. He spent nearly $700,000 in today's money on it and intended to sell it at a high markup to make a huge profit. And he probably would have too, if it weren't for the several other shiploads of rice that arrived to the US from Peru right after he signed the contract. The price per pound of rice dropped to even lower than it had been before China banned the export of rice, which was great for the consumers but terrible for Norton, who had just dropped $750,000 on hundreds of thousands of pounds of rice that he was now forced to sell for a loss. He tried desperately to get out of the contract, but his efforts were in vain. The case dragged on for almost 2 years and even reached the California Supreme Court, but in the end, Norton was forced to pay and his previous fortune shrunk considerably. So much so that he had to move into a boarding house. By 1859, he was almost penniless compared to how he had been before. He became extremely disillusioned with the US government and legal system, and after a while, the thought occurred to him that maybe I can do a better job than them. The idea took root in his mind, and that was that. He published a manifesto in July of that year and ran it as a paid ad in a San Francisco newspaper. 2 months later, he officially declared himself Emperor of the United States. His first act came only a few weeks later, in which he officially abolished Congress. He cited reasons of corruption and fraud. When nothing happened, in January of 1860, Norton summoned the US Army to get rid of the elected officials still in office. Naturally, both the US Army and Congress simply ignored him and went about their business as usual. But it is important to note that Norton was not a madman trying to take power for no reason. He wanted to fix a lot of the problems that he saw in politics and beyond. He wanted to fix the disputes that had led to the Civil War, and he wanted to stop the political fighting, which, in his mind, meant that he had to get rid of the political parties. He spent his days inspecting the streets of San Francisco, visiting parks and libraries and theaters, and also attending political gatherings, all the while wearing a blue and gold uniform that he designed himself. He even, and this is amazing, designed his own money that some shops in San Francisco actually accepted as a form of payment, and in the 1870 census, his occupation was listed as emperor. At one point, he was even arrested on the speculation of his mental health, but the citizens of the city were so outraged by this that they were forced to release him, and after that, the police officers gave him a friendly wave whenever they saw him. In 1862, when Mexico was invaded by Napoleon III, he also adopted the title Protector of Mexico. Additionally, throughout his reign as emperor, Norton wrote many letters to Queen Victoria suggesting that they get married in order to strengthen the political alliance between Britain and the US. Sadly, she never responded to him. Norton I died in 1880, and when the newspapers ran the next day, they ran with the headline, Le Roi est mort, or The King is Dead. But he was not forgotten. Mark Twain was living in San Francisco around the same time as him, and he modeled a character from Huckleberry Finn after him, the King. Norton is also a brief character in the Sandman comics by Neil Gaiman and Sean McManus, and he also appears in the Captain America comics. There have been efforts to rename the San Francisco Ferry Building Clock Tower the Emperor Norton Tower, and to place place a plaque on the San Francisco-Oakland Bay Bridge honoring him. Today, I made a Peruvian rice pudding, also known as Arroz Zambito, to commemorate the shipment of rice that Norton bought from Peru, which eventually led to his pursuit of the title Emperor of the United States. Let's try this. I have to say, this took so long to cook, but it was so completely worth it. There's so many flavors going on in here. There's a little coconut, which I wasn't expecting. There's anise seeds, cinnamon, evaporated milk, cloves. Overall, really, really good. If you liked learning about Norton I, or you just like the recipe that I made, then don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you. Bye!